the Lumix S1 Mark II, a camera we have to talk about. I did some run and gun, walking around, picking up shots at a Scandinavian festival um, here very recently. As I'm getting familiar with the camera, I haven't shot on the Lumix camera in well over 5 or 6 years. And this camera is the first Lumix camera where I was genuinely interested in. I don't have a lot of lenses for it at this point. I do have the PL adapter that allows me to adapt some of my PL glass, but for all the shots that we'll see in this video, I use this Sigma 24-70, and for the shots that needed ND, I use this B+W Variable ND, which is a terrific variable ND, and paired it with the camera. I did shoot everything in the Arri Log C3, and we just got some stuff to get into, so let's just roll the clips. As we get started here, I just want you to know that all of these shots were done handheld. They were shot on the Lumix S1 Mark II. This is just with available light. Outdoors, as you can see, in early morning, 10 a.m. So the sun was probably right at about 35 to 40 degrees up in the sky, very early morning. So you can see the long, long shadows, and you'll see more of that as we go through. I have the scopes up so that you can get a sense of what my exposure is, as well as my white balance and my saturation levels. And again, just to give us a better look. So what I'll do is I'm going to go full screen, and then I'll just play the clip so you guys can kind of see it. And by the way, if anybody's interested in these clips, the log version of the clips, I will make them available. Just, shoot me an email, text, or let me know somehow how to get a hold of you, and I'll give you a link where you might be able to download these and then grade them yourself and see how they behave on your own system. But right away, like I said, we're able to keep a lot of information in the highlights, and you can see that with the clouds, faded clouds in the sky, and how blue the rest of the sky actually is. This is almost close to what my eye was. Before I go on that clip, I want to show you something that happened here. Let me go full screen again. And this is what I want you to see. I want you to see how, he's in focus. Someone is going to walk in front of him, and then you'll see whether the camera hunts or it doesn't hunt. I was actually surprised at how well it hung on to him. So it happens pretty quick, but he's with his hands in focus. His eyes are going to come into focus here in a few frames. There it is. If we watch this in real time, it's almost imperceptible to see that the focus did in fact go to his hand, so it was slightly away, and obviously it has to do with him moving. But again, watching it in real time, it looks like the camera never lost focus on him. That's how good it is. So there's going to be another example here in a different clip where we're going to see something very different. What I want you guys to notice, as I'm noticing here, are a few things. Again, harsh sun, early morning. So this is after golden hour. And if you look at the tank there in the background, says Farmstead, it's white, right? It should be clipping, but it isn't. Same thing with the light pole where the sun is actually hitting it. It should be clipping. If we look at these helmets, so like the helmet with this guy, or the helmet here in the background, or even this other person here with the helmet off to my left side, so camera left. Um, the specular highlights are not clipping. There's this, we know that that is the harshest point in the exposure, but it isn't doing anything really weird. And here's what I mean. So we can see on the waveform that nothing is clipping. So this is why I say that, for me anyway, the Lumix S1 Mark II, the way it handles highlights, I did shoot in Arri Log C3, and that is the LUT that I'm using, to get this back to Rec 709. It does a very good job at retaining highlight information in a way that is pleasing and not video, right? So it doesn't do that weird flat plateau that we've seen from other cameras, including some cameras that I really loved over the years, like Canon's. So I was really pleased to see this. Let's go back to full and let's let this video play out here. Stabilization on this camera is, I think, really, really good. Obviously, I'm wiggling around as I'm trying to figure out if I need to make adjustments to my variable ND and so on. And the camera's just doing a good job of helping me get a better shot than I would if I didn't have IBIS. So it's kind of interesting for me. I'm gonna go back to that other clip before we move on and see some of these fighting scenes. And the reason for it is I want you guys to take a look again at the specular highlights. They're not taking you out of what's happening here, right? It's not like jarring to see, oh, look at those helmets that are just completely toast in the background. And I think that that's kind of cool. Um, I'm going to let this clip play out, even though, again, I was wiggling around way too much um, than I should have for what just happened. Let's go back. And I'm going to go full. Now, watch this. For some reason, right now, the two Vikings are in focus. This person in the foreground, this young man in the foreground, doesn't seem to be affecting how the camera focuses. I was using autofocus, just like I was using auto white balance, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But watch what happens here when I'm wiggling around, and I don't know, maybe it's because of the way that I was, moving around or whatever, but the camera lost focus. That's why I paused it. And it went to the back of his head. So the algorithm, and maybe that's something they could fix in some firmware update up, in the future or something. But even though it was tracking the action up until about this point, even though it was tracking the action up until here, it then quickly moved to the back of his head, which is fine. But if there's a way, and maybe I just don't know this yet, because these menus are deep and they are, I'm still learning them. I'm just going to say that. In some cases, they're a little overwhelming because of how many options we have with Lumix. But if there is a way to set some sort of priority on whether what it's focusing on when it's tracking and when to maybe jump focus, if there is some setting, I need to discover that setting. I need to learn about that setting, and then I need to make those adjustments. The good news here is that we no longer have the challenges that we had, back in the day with like Sony cameras, for example, where when it would lose focus, it would automatically just go to infinity. And then the entire shot was completely ruined. And I'm not saying that in this case, had that been a real shot that I needed, wouldn't have been ruined, but I probably wouldn't have been on autofocus. Um, that would have been one thing to make sure that I didn't ruin my shot. But it was always super distracting, and it always told you somebody's using a video camera or a camcorder, because as soon as it didn't know what to focus on, it just automatically reset itself to infinity. And here you could see it chose to focus on the young man here again in the beginning of the shot. I wanted to see how long it was going to take. It wasn't going to switch. So then when I zoomed in, it automatically locked in on the action. and it focused on them the rest of the shot. And it kept them in focus regardless of how much we were moving around, which I thought was really good. And again, now we see the back of the head and boom, it triggered back the focus. Like it just jumped focus and ignored the action. Again, that could be operator error. I don't know this at the moment because I am not familiar enough. I'm getting myself comfortable with the camera before I start using it on like real paid projects. And this is the reason why this scenario for me was incredibly learning and telling. And what I'm seeing out of it, again, it's reliable when I don't have stuff in the foreground. The action is tracked. People are in focus. The colors look nice and true to what I was seeing at the moment when all of this was happening. And you can see, again, we're not having challenges with anything looking video-ish. I guess is the best way for me to say that. It's an interesting shot. I was sitting on some bleachers that were also then slanted on a hill. And even though the camera level was showing me that I was level because of the way that the terrain is, which again, I just relied on the tool for no reason other than I'm learning how to use the camera. You can see that it looks like my camera is angled. And it was angled because the earth was not flat where we were doing this. I want to talk a little bit about the scene that we just saw. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to let this play, even though, again, my camera is clearly clipped. And what I want to show you all is that even though the sun is hitting directly on this cloth, it's not pure white. It's like an off white. I can still see texture on my system. I can still see texture on this cloth that they're setting up as a shade or a piece of shelter. And then this other clip, I'm going to pause it for just a second. And the reason why I like this clip a lot for me personally is twofold. One, the sun is right behind the tree, directly center of frame. It's right above that. And then we can see how much information in the sky we do or don't have. But what what is not obvious is that this was one giant cloud that was off to the left side of the screen. So it isn't like it lost all the color information because the cloud was in fact white, although the sun is there, which would naturally wash out the sky. There is another shot that we're going to show here later where you'll see what it is that I'm saying and then how the sky actually continued to shift as, the day kept going on and the earth is rotating and so forth. The other thing that I want to point out about this shot is there are lots of skin tones. Not everyone here is the same ethnicity. Not everyone here has the same hair color or is the same age and so on. And even though they're all in shadow, right, because they're all being backlit essentially, the skin tones look really good. Like they look really good without trying. Now, if I go back here, you can see what my scopes are so that you get a sense again of how it is that this shot was exposed. And when we look, we can see the guy here with the glasses and the beard. His hair is catching some hard backlight, but it doesn't look like just this white spot on his head, right? Or the blonde lady, which I probably shouldn't have paused when she's, talking. We do lose some texture or some detail in her hair where the sun is hitting her, but she's like as blonde as you get. And not that that's an excuse or anything, but I feel like this is still not taking me away from the scene. It's not making me feel like something went wrong with the shot. And I don't know. I just like even this little guy with, the red shirt or red orangey shirt. His skin tone is close to mine, and I mean, it looks good. Where in the past, skin tones like mine, and I say in the past, I'm talking GH4 days, long time ago, long time ago. Um, that wasn't always the case. It wasn't super awesome. It was something a little different. And for me, that was a reason why not to shoot on Lumix way back in the day. But clearly, they've come an incredible way, and this to me looks good. It looks good. Um, People's skins look nice. It doesn't look like plastic. They look like they're alive. They don't look desaturated. Here's another shot of the Vikings, or the guys here dressed up as Vikings, ready to put on their, you know, full fight with real steel knives, or blades, I guess is the right way to say it. And again, we got the sun hitting their helmets, particularly this guy right here. And you can clearly see where the sun just takes all the texture away from his helmet. But you can see how, from the most intense sunspot or hotspot on his helmet to the outer layer, there is a lot of information. And when I let this play, it looks like what my eyes were seeing at that moment when these guys are standing there. Yep, the sun is definitely hitting him there, and there is still texture and detail, except for in the most intense sunspot on his helmet. And I think when I saw that in camera, I was like, I got to see what this looks like on my computer. And when I saw it on my computer, and then I, added the LUT and color graded it, I was impressed. I was genuinely impressed. Now, here's something, and this is a good time for me to talk about, and this I'm pausing it on purpose to talk about auto white balance. So we saw the shot of the crowd earlier where they are all backlit and in shadow, but everyone's skin didn't instantly switch to magenta. So what happened and what's so different? And the only thing that I can explain, and unfortunately I wasn't shooting raw, so there is no way for me to know exactly, um, if this was or wasn't the case. But I think that the auto white balance is what makes the skin tones shift, because now we're seeing everyone, whether they're backlit or not. In this case, this guy with who's fighting, the Viking who's fighting, look at this area in under his neck and how it begins to not look really natural. And then the guy with the beard here in the background that was, backlit in the earlier shot, you can see just how magenta he is. But that's true for everyone and everyone's skin. And I'm going to think it's because I used auto white balance, because auto white balance will easily skew, a few hundred degrees in either direction and then make some of that happen. This shot, this is in slow motion, so I'm just going to let it play out because I think I could just talk. But you can see where the sun is, which is, again, right behind this tree, right above here. And the reason why I was impressed with the shot, impressed in the sense of color information, is because this red in his pants, or his, I don't know what the Vikings call their pants, so I'm going to call them pants. The red back here is not clipping the red. There are other camera systems, not red, not airy, but there are other camera systems where this particular shade of red would have been a problem. And I think if I speed it up a bit, I can get them even closer. So you could see just how bright that red is. Even though it's backlit, this is a very bright set of pants that this guy's wearing. And we are not clipping the red channel. So um, I was pleased with it. It was really, again, I can't say enough about the color and the ability to retain color on this camera. And I think that's one of the things that I'm the most impressed. I also have never had um, overheating issues. So that's another plus. I know that there are some people who live in different parts of the world that have had those issues. I have not. And I am in North Dakota. So this day I feel like it was pretty hot. It was 85, 86 degrees. And to me, that's a little toasty. So again, but look at how much hmm, look at how much texture there is in these shirts that these people are wearing and how well it just hangs on to all that information. These were all shot in 4K. So all of this is just straight up 4K. Again, here we get another chance to see specular highlights on the helmets, and it just does a good job. And then tracking the action, it's not going to the audience's face. It is sticking with the people that I actually wanted to be in focus. And I think that's kind of cool. I'm really, really happy with the performance of this camera. We look at the exposure again. We're not clipping any dark areas, and we're definitely not clipping any highlights or any color information. Why don't we just, let's, I need to move on. There were, I'm going to just close this out for now or shrink it. There were a couple other shots I wanted to talk about. Oh, here. This shot, as you can see, we're nearing that clipping point or that cliff that I'm talking about with the highlights. So I obviously screwed up the exposure because I could have corrected for this to avoid the lack of information in the sky here in the background, right here in the background. But this shot was another example of what auto white balance, I believe it's auto white balance, is doing in the camera. Because again, look at his face. It's almost like his tongue is the same color as his neck, which is not really true um, for humans. So I think it's because of the auto white balance. I think that I could correct for this if I don't use auto white balance. Yeah, and that's my take on it. So if I move on, okay, this is an interesting shot. It's an interesting shot because this would be, again, same time of day, and we're not clipping information, right? That's key. This shot where he's standing and how he's standing, he would be considered to be in open shade. And what that means is that there is no sun hitting him at all. And you can see where the sun is actually hitting this wood, and is really only the top because everything else is in shadow. Here's another harsh line of where he is in essentially full shadow. This time, the auto white balance did a good job because his skin looks like it did to my eye. In here, another example of, again, the camera doing a good job of hanging on to color information, texture, and tracking the subject the way that I want him to be tracked, and doing a really, really solid job at color reproduction. And if we want to look at the scopes, it just does a beautiful job. I feel like I'm singing a lot of praise onto this camera, but I think it is really well deserved. Here's another shot where we have direct sun in the background. He's in full shade, working. I cranked up the ISO to make sure that I got, good exposure, and I'm getting good, solid contrast, good, solid color. And one thing that this camera does not do that other cameras in the past, older cameras, older systems, cameras from other manufacturers have done is that when they give you more dynamic range, when they give you more exposure latitude, they reduce the contrast. And we don't see that with the Lumix S1 Mark II. And that's saying something. This might be one of the best hybrid cameras that I have ever personally used or ever personally owned. And you all know that I have my biases and favorites, but for a hybrid camera, this camera really did the job. Let's head back to the studio. Overall, I would say I'm beyond impressed by this camera. The color that comes out of the camera, straight out of the camera, with the LUTs that they provide. I did pay for the Arri Log C3 upgrade, and that is what I shot everything in. But they just look really, really good. And I would say that the highlight roll off, the way that this camera, when shooting in Arri Log C3, I haven't experienced the others yet, so I don't know. But the way that this camera handles highlight roll off is very, very good. It is so good that and so close to what I can get out of my reds and what I can and have gotten out of Arri in the past. Is it Arri or red level? No. But is it close enough? And I would say yes. There is a little bit of this magenta tilt or shift that happens in high contrast scenarios where the skin goes a little magenta. It is pleasing. It is not horrible, but it does need to be managed, in post, unless you really love that look. I haven't baked in any LUTs into the camera to see what it is that I can get straight out of the camera, but I'm going to say that for a run and gun setup, this is good with better lenses. And I'm not saying this lens is horrible, but it's not awesome. But with better lenses, I think I could get an even better image out of this camera. And that's really what I'm excited about. I'm legit. I would rather shoot on this camera if I'm running and gunning or doing something personal or I'm not going to be lighting than I would any of my other hybrid mirrorless options at this point. So I'm happy I decided to keep it. At first, I thought I was going to probably not keep it, but the more I see and look into this image and the way that the colors are rendered, the happier I am. So I don't know. Hopefully, you enjoyed this video. I'm just sharing my thoughts here because sometimes listening to me talk about my gear or how I'm using my gear helps me organize my thoughts. And I'd like to share that with you all in case somebody finds any value there. So until next time, I'm Carlos, and I'll catch up with you guys on the next one. Take care.